everyone. Welcome to Escaping the Chains podcast. I am your host, John Humphries. We have Nathan White with us today. We're excited to have him here. Make sure and subscribe to the YouTube channel or check us out on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Give us a good review. If you don't like it, just don't give us a review at all. Thank you. So today we have Nathan White. He's from Kokomo. I've known him through Facebook, and we've had a lot of conversations and stuff over the years, but we're excited to have him in today. Nathan, how you doing?
Doing well.
So why don't you go ahead and just tell everybody who you are and what you do and a little bit of your background.
Yeah, so my name is Nathan White. I work at First City Recovery Center in Kokomo. The 15th of this month, I celebrated 6.5 years sober.
Congratulations on that.
I appreciate it. I work in community outreach and as a recovery liaison, getting people into treatment.
So that's pretty interesting work, isn't it? The liaison part is, it's probably a lot of connecting and
absolutely
networking and getting in with, and you said you work with businesses and stuff too.
Yeah, building relationships with human resources, EAPs at local factories, and trying to build a direct provider to treatment center relationship.
Yeah, that's good. We were talking earlier, it's really cool how a lot of businesses have changed their concept of addiction and their employees struggling, and now they're trying to offer help and work their insurances out to make sure that they're covered. So have you seen a lot of change in that since you started there?
Most definitely. Even with, I think union businesses were ahead of the game in that as far as having union and company representation and EAPs helping employees out. But I've seen now non-union businesses have good programs for their employees to get help if they need it.
I think that's really important too, because if you have somebody struggling, one of the first things I don't do, we just kind of are, I'm like a middleman in what I do, but that's one of the first things somebody will say is I can't lose my job.
Right.
So if you have support from your job, it's a lot, you probably have a lot higher success rate of getting people the help they need before
Absolutely.
they completely unravel. What do you think, operating in the world of recovery and sobriety, what is some of the biggest challenges you face just on a day-to-day basis?
Well, I think the number one challenge that we face that I'm pretty sure you're familiar with is you can't help somebody if they don't participate in their own rescue. Mm-hmm. It takes somebody really wanting to do the thing. And I see that as, we put a lot of effort into this thing. I always think about, and I forget which verse it is, but when Paul says, to the weak, I become weak to win the weak. Mm-hmm. I become all things to all men so that by all possible means I might save some.
Yeah.
That work is all the effort, and it seems like the return sometimes, trying to help people is that if they don't want it, they're not gonna do it.
I think that's the hard thing too, is because you'll have family reach out to you and stuff, and they really want it for a person, but it's if they don't, if they're not at that place, it doesn't matter. First off, a person's not going to save you anyway, but it doesn't matter what professional you get in here. If they are not ready and don't want it, your success rate's almost nothing. Almost
Absolutely.
0%. Side note, we did not plan on wearing Chicago White Sox hats today. I forgot to say that at the beginning. So somebody probably tuned in and thought they were watching a Chicago White Sox podcast. It's not. Yeah, and I think it's an interesting kind of work because we have mentors and stuff like that work with us, and we're in long-term recovery. And we're such an interesting new type of thing. And then you have recovery coaches and all the stuff that you do in this field. And I think one of the things is figuring out how to relax, shut it down, and actually be selfish with some of your time, because that was I've battled that because people have access to you on a little bit different of a level than if you're just working, a 9 to 5. Have you had to figure out that balance of what's self-care, how to be a parent, you're married now, how to be a husband, all of those things, and have so many different demands on you?
Yeah, no, I am married now, and my wife and I have had moments of intense fellowship when it comes to my boundaries.
Yeah.
As far as like, I'll drop anything if an addict or alcoholic reaches out. And sometimes that's not healthy for me.
Yeah.
So what I've tried to do, and what my mentors have tried to instill in me, is build a network. Like, if I can't at that moment, give them a resource, somebody that I trust that they can reach out to, and like lean on each other.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's the big thing is we were never meant to do life alone, right?
Right.
And I've got to lean on people who are farther along than me, and I got to know when I need to tap out.
Yeah.
Like, I need some time. And if I plan something with my kids or my wife, I need to follow through on that as well. I mean, that's recovery too, I think.
Yeah. That's really important. You know what I mean? Because like if you start to not do those things, everybody around you is like, this dude's, you can be solid to the world and a flake at home. You know what I mean? It's like, well, he said he's going to,
Yeah.
yeah. And that brings up, so I want to get into your story, but I know like watching you on Facebook, we have some similarities in our stories about like reconnecting with our kids. You have two boys, right?
Yep.
And I have two girls
And a stepson now too.
and a stepson. So, what was it like? And like I said, we'll get into your story, but what was it like as you started to find recovery and freedom? And you were going to Fuel Church, right? So you were looking to find freedom, not just recovery. I think they're different. You know what I mean? Like you find your faith. But as they started to, what was your relationship like with them prior to that? And then afterwards, what was it like having them? Because they're a regular part of your life now. You can see that. Like, what was all of that like?
So when I was arrested March 15th of 2018. And when I was in jail for 47 days, when I got out, that neither one would even speak to me. That's where I started recovery.
Yeah.
And a little sidetrack was, when I first got in jail, my goal wasn't to not use drugs for the rest of my life. I didn't even know what recovery really was. Freedom started first for me. I had a particular cellmate that was trying to get me to go to Bible study every single week. And I refused until April 11th. I went to Bible study and was led in the prayer of surrender by Pastor Andrew Green, who was a chaplain at Howard County Jail at the time, at 10:55 a.m. And that's what God started recovery for me. I mean, freedom was the beginning. Because it almost immediately he started working on me. We got back to our cell, and I'm not ashamed to admit it, I was sobbing.
Yeah.
And my cellmate spoke a verse to me. And this guy, I'm telling you, I've never met a guy before that he don't need an index to a Bible. He'll tell you where it's at, what the verse is, what the everything, and he says Philippians 3:13-14 to me. Brethren, I count myself not to have apprehended, but this one thing I do, forgetting those things which are behind, reaching forward to those things which are ahead. I press toward the mark for the prize of the high calling of God in Christ Jesus. And for me, it was like, whoa, this moment, like I can move forward. Like God is showing a way that I can move forward in my life. And as I went into recovery, I realized where the kids come into play, forgetting in that verse isn't necessarily like those things didn't happen.
Right.
For me, I'm accountable to the things that I did. I need to make amends for the things, but I don't live there anymore.
Yeah.
And so I set about starting to rebuild my relationship with my kids. My ex-wife and I had a house. I gave up all the equity in the house for 50-50 custody. So I started this journey off with a single cardboard box of clothes and one pair of shoes. And all I wanted was 50-50. I was living at my parents' house, just outside of Kokomo, about 4 miles outside. And they were coming out there. We were week on, week off. And they were coming out for my week, not even hardly speaking to me. And I can remember going to my pastor, Pastor Jacob Burgott at Fuel. He was a childhood friend of mine, and he allowed me to start working there at the church. And I remember going to him one day and saying, I can't believe it's like this. And you know what he looked back at me and said? He said, that's what your kids were saying for years. Mm. And I had this moment where I'm like, even in recovery, even trying to get, I'm selfish. I'm thinking about how them being upset is affecting me.
Yeah.
So we set about on this plan of only validating their feelings, being there for them, and I could say all the words in the world, but my actions were going to be what repaired our relationship. And around COVID was when everything started to change. Like I always tell people, I love hip hop music.
Yeah.
Love rap music, man. Grew up on it. It was the only music that I like. But I live at my parents' house, and I'm finding out that I really like Hallmark Christmas movies.
Right. They're all the same kind of. But
Yeah. Quintessential house, white picket fence, snow on the roof, right?
Yeah.
So my mom has all these Hallmark Christmas puzzles. And I'm saying to my oldest son, COVID, and we're stuck out there pretty much. I'm like, do one of these puzzles with me. And he's like, no. And I finally wear on him, and he's like, over 2 days, we do this whole puzzle. We're chopping it up. We're having the best time. And a couple of days later, he goes, hey, can we do another one of those? Mm. And it was like, there it was, man. I'm not just a father. I'm there. I'm present. Mm. And he's, it wasn't a month later. He's coming to me and crying to me saying, I should have forgiven you earlier. And I had to be like, no. That the job was on me. Your feelings were your feelings, and they needed to be validated.
So because he's probably a tough dude at that point too, right? Bonding over Hallmark puzzles.
I don't know how happy he'll be about me saying that.
That's a miracle right there. I think what I like about that, and like what your pastor said, I think sometimes we do a disservice, sometimes in the church, because we get these guys. It's usually guys because that's what I work with, mm-hmm. But understanding like I'm not the victim. Even if people did me wrong, I have what I need to do. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter if baby's mom's giving me a hard time. It doesn't matter if the state, the support's a lot. It doesn't, like all of the circumstances. And like we own our stuff, like you have to own your stuff and not like point fingers at all the things that could have been. But I really like that because it's like, like we have to step outside of ourselves and be like, I wasn't a great person. And, like I could keep track of who did who wrong and all of these things in life. But the truth is for us to like man up and move forward, you just own the stuff, and it is validating. We don't have the right to tell people how long it's going to take well, they should have forgiven me by now. Mm-hmm. Well, that's their process and they have every right. And also we can't spend 10, 15 years doing people how we want and then boom, well, I want it in a month. Like, why am I not? So I like that part, and I don't want to cut you off because I want to hear this story, but I think that's one of the things sometimes we do a disservice because it's like, oh yeah, I will not shake my head in agreement with somebody if they're talking to me about, people not forgiving them yet and stuff like that. I will encourage you and we'll set up a plan, but you have got to move forward. But they have the right. Mm. The people that you hurt have the right to go through their process. And just because I'm sober now and I'm saved, and I'm reading my Bible, that doesn't do it for people. Especially, I don't know about you, but I've been telling people that the whole time I was using. Oh, I'm better now. You know what I mean? I'm back. Everything's fine. I'm not using anymore. I was lying constantly. So you guys. So you had this moment, and I really like that where he was saying he wished he would have forgiven you sooner. So what? So now what? Because you still have your other son, right? Is he?
Yeah. So mine and my youngest son Mason's relationship had gotten better earlier in just kind of an organic way, naturally. But my oldest son, he witnessed more. And I wasn't there for him like I should have been. He was older, so he was hurt, man. He was, so it took that, it took him really, because, I think when I was using, well, they didn't want to upset the apple cart, right?
Yeah.
They're not going to come at me with this stuff. And all of a sudden I get sober and it's like, here's the opportunity to let him have it.
Yeah.
And learning that just because I'm sober and saved doesn't mean that, I can't be upset from that. I just have to understand it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? I have to validate their feelings and constantly let them know that, I love them and that's not who I am today. And I'll tell you what, man, it's been the greatest honor and privilege of my life to be given a second chance with my kids. It will go down as the single greatest thing that has ever happened because, life was rough before I went to jail. And it got real bad for them.
Yeah. Boy, when God starts to restore the family, huh? I'm telling you. I don't know about you, but I'll be on the front porch sometimes just crying because I can hear them running around inside. And even when they're arguing a little bit, it's like, what a blessing. I mean, I'm probably a little delusional, but, but yeah, it blows your mind because you remember, you remember, it's like there's a time where I didn't think they weren't going to forgive me or they weren't even going to be living with me. You know what I mean? Like I wouldn't even have eyes on them. So how did you end up in jail to begin with? Like where did like your use start and were you an angry person? Were you like what was your life
No.
like?
I had some significant childhood trauma early, like at age 11. So I started to look for, like what we do. I tried to look for the escape in life, right? And at 13, I started smoking weed, and that progressed into hard drugs, pills, all, you know. I don't have to list
Right.
the accomplishments, right, or
Right.
what you want to call them. But I got my oldest son was born in 2004. My youngest son was born in 2006. I married their mother in 2007, but I used the whole time, and I was fully psychologically and physically addicted to opioids at that time. Our relationship, because of that, got progressively worse, and my kids' lives got worse. And in 2015, I started using methamphetamine also, and that that progressed my downfall.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like whatever I was able to subsist or get by as an opioid addict, it went down fast. And I got into what took me to jail was got into a physical altercation with my ex-wife. And I went to jail for 47 days. All those charges got dropped. But I'll tell you, the arresting officer, he could have probably just walked away, but I think in knowing that these charges probably weren't going to stick, but he did his job, and he got me out of the situation. I needed clarity. We needed away from each other, and that was the beginning for me.
And then that's when you ended up
Yeah.
in a Bible study.
Yeah.
After I like how like a lot of times when you hear people's story, there's like this one person in it, kind of like a Christian Yoda or something. You know what I mean? Like it's like, well, this dude, you know what I mean? He was my bunkie or something like that. And I kept saying like, you need to go to this, you need to go to this. And then, but to see the fruit from just that little interaction when you finally say yes.
Yeah, man, I'll tell you what, I went to Bible study. When I got out of jail, man, I was homeless. I didn't have I hadn't even approached my parents about living with them. I'm staying in a hotel, which is not a nice hotel, by the way, in Kokomo off of handouts from friends, wondering what am I going to do? And my mother coordinated with my ex-wife to have the boys come for the weekend to stay with me. And I didn't even have social media before I went to jail. and I had an Instagram, and on Instagram I posted a picture with me and the boys in the parking lot of the hotel, and I put 3 Kings, and the first person that liked it, the emblem said Fuel Church, and it was my old buddy from when we were kids, Pastor Jacob Burgai. I didn't even know that he was a pastor at a church. At 19, he went off to Bible college and got his, because we were running around buddies.
Yeah.
Like, he doesn't shy away from his story either. And he decided to change his life then. And I spent 20 years in addiction. So I saw that he was a pastor at the church, and I said, man, I'm going to go there on Sunday. And so I had my mom pick the kids up Sunday. It dropped me off there. I sat in, the series was When the Devil Knocks. And I sat in there, man, and it was like, how God will do. Like, this message was tailor-made for me.
Yeah.
Everything about it. And I walked out into the lobby after, and I'll tell you what, from growing up with him to where I was when I got out of jail, I'm just over 6'2". I was 168 pounds when I went to jail. Like, I'm 230 now. I was practically unrecognizable, but he knew me immediately, and he said, "I'm here for you, man." And he said, "Come by tomorrow at church and come talk to me at my office." So I showed up there, told him everything, like things I'd never told anybody. I sat in there, and we were in there for hours. And he said, "Come back tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. I got some stuff you can do around the church." And I started working there. I worked there for 6 months in the beginning. And really, I was coming out of active addiction. I probably wasn't that great of an employee.
Right.
I should have been paying them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because of these people were speaking life into me, things I'd never even heard. Sometimes uncomfortable. I remember that first week I'm working. We leave they don't work on Friday. And so I'm going to be back on Sunday, right? Well, on Thursday, at the end of the day, he puts his arm around me and says, "Hey, man, I love you." And I'm thinking to myself, I don't think I'm going to go back on Sunday.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've had a grown man tell me that before.
Right.
And I can remember I was probably a year sober when I sat thinking about it. I thought, man, he really does love me.
Yeah.
With this Christ-like love, that we get when we get saved. And I just didn't know what it was when he said it, but he proved it to me. Where I'm at First City Recovery Center, I stopped working there because the pastor was like, it's time to move forward, right? Mm-hmm. And during COVID, I get noticed by Jamie Whitaker, was the program director at Turning Point at the time. Get hired there, worked there for a little while. Dan Metz, the owner of First City, reaches out to me, and I start working at First City. The way it works for me is I look back at the steps, right?
Yeah.
I don't agree to go to Bible study that day. I don't get saved. When I get saved, I don't post a picture of my kids and title it 3 Kings. Pastor Jake never likes the photo. I never end up working at Fuel. None of that happens if I don't make that first decision to get saved. I mean, that's where I look back, like we take these steps in faith, but I can see the concrete steps as I look back.
Yeah. Man, that's dope. Is he still the pastor there?
Yeah.
So I've never been there. I got to get up there sometime because they do a lot of stuff in the community. Some of it I see it, but I have never met a person that's went up there and didn't come back and be like, I love that place. I really got to get up there sometime. That's Fuel Church in Kokomo, Indiana. It's right there. So I'm coming from Gas City. It's right there when I get into town, isn't it?
Yep, on 22.
22.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're in the Kokomo area or anywhere around there, go check them out. Yeah, I've heard a lot of good things, and I've seen a lot of your journey with the pastor and stuff. It's really cool. Loving people and speaking life into them is so important because I think, especially with a lot of people, they've never had anybody say, even like you're doing a good job, So, and like you said with him saying, like, I love you, you almost quit going to church because of it. I remember when you got a house
Yeah.
and posted. I was like, that's so dope. You and the
Yeah.
boys were out on the front porch. Did you have a dog too, or did you got a dog a little bit after
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so cool. I think sharing our stories is so important because people are like, oh, you post all the time. It's like, well, you know what I mean? Like, God gave me this. Like, I'm playing with house money. You know what I mean? Like, me and you were talking earlier, and us being more pills and pharmaceuticals for the most of our addiction. Like, we wouldn't even probably be here if it was the fentanyl stuff going around because like when I came up, you just handed me something and I'd be like, what does this do? And then I took it.
Hmm.
You know, I didn't ask no questions. I didn't check no numbers on it.
When you generally, whether good or bad, knew what to expect.
Hmm.
And now it really is Russian roulette. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, I don't think that I'd be here today if fentanyl had hit before I got sober.
Yeah. When I used to do the hospital responses, I talk about that quite a bit on here, but it's just like somebody thinks they take a half a Xanax and they're getting Narcan and
Hmm.
almost die. And we were also talking about that, like, because that's an impact I think that at least in America, because like other countries, people, you know, there's a lot of death and stuff, but like coming out of this world and then staying in it, because that's what we're doing. You know, what I mean, we're going back into where we came from. There has been like so much loss, you know, and I don't know if you want to share anything about some of those stories, the stories of the things you've been through, but I know like the people that I work with closely and just you know, I talk about Bond a lot, but there's so many people like that I was close with, and then boom, they decided to use again, or and then they're gone. You
Hmm.
know, and it's like you go through it so much. And I
Hmm.
was telling you, it's like I don't even doing this kind of work. Sometimes you don't even get a chance to mourn. It may be a year later, and then you're on the porch or you know whatever wherever your place is, and then you're like bawling because you just it just all hits you at once.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't mind sharing. Like, I know probably the most devastating one after I got sober was my 19-year-old cousin.
Hmm.
And I tried to help him, you know, and obviously you had said it earlier in the podcast, and it's true. Like, I mean, I'm a man. I can't save anyone.
Yeah,
I can help facilitate change for you if you're willing.
yeah,
And for the most part, he was very willing, but he's young. And he decided to believe the lie that the devil and our disease tells us is that I can use one more time and I'm not going to go back to treatment. I'm going to use one more time. I'm not going to go to jail, and I'm certainly not going to die
yeah,
because that's the lie, right? And he did. And for me, that's the toughest one, man, because he's was the son of my first cousin, so I held him when he was born as a baby, and then I had to go identify his body.
yeah,
And I think, you know, I remember I used to tell people because that phrase from they say in NA, some will die so that others can live, right? I used to say it without thinking about it. And it was never harder to say in my life until after that happened.
yeah,
But, you know, God has a purpose for everything. And in my life, the purpose for me to dig in deeper for my recovery. And yeah, working and doing what we do, it's hard to grieve.
yeah,
And really, where I realized months and months later that I was dealing with the situation was I was on my way to speak in an AA meeting and had no idea that this was going to be the scope of my conversation. But it ended up being all about my cousin Ethan. And I remember saying, because this is the point I'd gotten to, you know, when he first died, I wanted to blame God. I wanted to blame fentanyl. I wanted to blame whoever sold him the fentanyl. I wanted to blame myself. But what I'd come to the realization was, you know, unfortunately, he chose to use, and that choice took him out. And that fact doesn't mean I love him any less.
yeah.
And I had to deal with that as a person.
That's hard. That's so hard, man. To not take it personal, and I think like when it hits closer to home, like those stories, like knowing knowing the family, which obviously you are the family, but like knowing all the people close to him and like the impact of those. And I think that's why, like, one of the reasons I don't shut up about it is just because, like, when that happens and it's somebody close to you, your life never goes back to normal. Like you function and stuff like that, but like these are people's, like, because they're getting younger and younger. So these are people's like children, and they're still children. Like the way we see it, and just the impact that that has, and having to go to the funeral. And we've been to so many. You stand in that line and you just, I say it sometimes because I feel like a lot of people, when they're using, they're like, I screwed up too bad. And your story, my story, like that tells you like there's no such thing,
Right.
but like you get to where they believe it, and they don't think that they don't think they're worthy. They think that my kids hate me. There's nothing to live for. But I've never been in line, waiting to say goodbye to a friend or somebody that I was working with on whatever level, and there not be people up there devastated. It's never happened. In all of the funerals I've been to, it's like these people are devastated. But a lot of times the person in that casket would have told you, I don't, nobody cares. I've messed up too bad. And it's like nobody believes that but you. You know what I mean? And with like the work you do is like your family will do anything to get you in front of somebody, to get you to treatment, like so many people. And it's like if you distance yourself, it may feel like you're alone, but you're not. There's always like somebody that cares, because I've never went to the funeral home and it be empty. I've never went and that book not be signed. I've never went and there not be people standing by the casket having to greet everybody that are devastated. And that's but yeah, like when you think about like just the impact of all of these lives lost, and it kind of keeps you driven. But like you said, sometimes it gets hard because like when you go through it, you fight getting numb to it, because like especially the couple years after the pandemic, it was just like it felt like at least every couple weeks, once a month, it was like somebody you know. So
Yeah, it's like what do they call with nurses? They have kind of trauma fatigue almost, because they deal with if you're working in a triage nurse,
yeah,
you get kind of numb to that. Like I think a big thing for us to do that work in this industry is fight against getting fatigued on that.
yeah,
Like it's still traumatizing, and I can't compartmentalize that.
yeah,
If I do that, then I'm a few steps away from going back.
yeah,
Because that's what I try to do in life. I'll box this away, and I'm not going to deal with it.
yeah,
So I got to deal with those things.
yeah. So you're with the boys most of the time, and then you got married.
Yep.
So how did that happen?
So, well, as a recovering addict, like I don't like to play by the rules, right?
Right.
So I went against all my mentor and sponsorship advice early on, and I did plenty of dating in that first year.
Yeah, and I want to touch on that too,
Yeah.
because I think like that's probably something that hindered both of us. Like
Yeah.
you're out here, like you're a face of what people say recovery, but also people can be harsh.
Absolutely.
The community can be a little bit harsh as you work through that. And I think like as we, like when you're in active addiction, sometimes I try to explain it to people like you're a little invisible. I mean, I can slide in and out of people don't even know I exist, and then you start to get healthy again. God's giving you a voice, and you start to get attention, and you have mentors and stuff like, chill out, dude. But it's like, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like I'm not used to this, and I don't know how to handle it.
Well, also, I would operate off that belief system that, well, I'm not getting high. I'm not using drugs and alcohol. Like, God's really not going to worry about this,
Right,
and I couldn't have been more wrong.
right,
Because I can tell you there was at times when early relationships would go bad, that my recovery would come to a screeching halt.
yeah,
And my growth with God would come to a screeching halt. By the grace of God, I never picked up,
yeah,
but I certainly wasn't growing. And yet I would go to the next one thinking, like Destination Recovery. This one,
Right.
this is going to be the fix. This relationship. COVID, I'll tell you, COVID was, it was a blessing to me in this regard. My, and my sobriety date is March 15th. The first day we shut down was March 15th of 2020, and it was a Sunday, and I was going to be going to church that day, celebrating my sobriety date, right?
Yeah.
It was a big day for me, and I couldn't even go to church. And this relationship that I had been in had just ended, and it ended badly. And I can remember a couple weeks earlier when it ended, and I called pastor on the way home from this person's apartment, and I said, man, I just can't stand myself anymore because of how I'm lying to myself every time knowing that this is not right.
Yeah.
So I took my year off from dating when COVID hit. I didn't, and, using dope for 20 years, you would think that I would say the most empowering thing that I ever did was stop using dope, and that's just not true.
Yeah.
Breaking codependency was the most empowering thing in my recovery.
I think like when we do groups and stuff, and I've obviously this has been something, I pray for the people, my mentors, because of this topic, because it was just like you, and it's also feeding something that's not healthy.
Absolutely.
Like that affirmation, and all of those things, and it's like, well, I'll just get approval someplace else. You're literally just overlapping, and then one day you wake up and you're like, I haven't healed from literally any. Not to mention, like I've hurt people too, which is I think it's harder for me to process. Is like I've hurt people in the process of what, But like you wake up and you're like, I didn't take time to process or anything. I just ran. And I was like, and it's just it's real, like you said, it's real similar because it's like, you're just chasing this. I don't want to call it necessarily a high, but it could be, but it's just like you're chasing and ignoring everything you just went through. And then you're just going forward and you're ignoring sound, solid counsel that's always been, like for me, of the people that have always guided me right. It's like, they don't understand, right? Like you don't understand.
Yeah, we're terminally unique, right?
Right. Yeah. So this is different. It's different for me. And so you went through. So, and if you are in recovery, or sobriety, I would strongly suggest that you do that because you do have. You've been dependent on stuff, whether it's relationships, drugs, whatever it is, for a long time, and I wish that I would have taken that time just up front, like people told me, like I'm going to take a year, get closer to God, learn who I am, because that's another thing is like you're out there and you don't even know yourself really, so it's like you're starting to become like I don't know about you like me, but you're becoming a chameleon. It's like, okay, what does the person want? I can be that. And it's all counterfeit. It's the same freaking thing, and not to badmouth, but it's just like it's a counterfeit, just like the pills were a counterfeit. You don't actually have like feelings invested in anything. It's just something to like try to ease emotion and stuff.
Absolutely.
But I would strongly suggest take that time. And I know it's easy for me to say it because I didn't listen and you didn't listen at first, but take the time to get to know yourself and what it is like you're actually looking for.
Yeah, like I didn't even know what a healthy relationship looked like. So how could I expect me jumping into these relationships to be healthy? So I take that year off from year 2 to 3 and work the steps again and expect to find out why all these women were so toxic. And then I find out there was one common denominator in the whole thing. It was me. It was this guy. So I started to dig in on that. Like new things were revealed, right? And my wife and we had begun, I think she had commented on a Facebook story when I had the dog in there, just, And we started a very innocent back and forth, to the point where when I finally asked her out, she was like, I was thinking you didn't even like me. Because not realizing that had taken myself out of dating and was working on that. So yeah, it was, and it started out exactly like I would have wanted it to today. There wasn't an agenda behind our communications, and they were and they were honest and innocent and genuine, and it, progressed into us getting married and having a blended family.
Yeah. And congratulations on that.
Yeah.
Because you guys seem awesome.
Yeah.
Did you meet your match? Is that what happened?
Absolutely. Yeah, I absolutely did. She, she's originally born in Argentina, grew up in Chicago, so she's way tougher than me. So she keeps me in line for sure.
Yeah. I was talking to a friend the other day about the steps because I came up in Celebrate Recovery, so I'm familiar with, but I never worked them. And a friend of mine, we got to talking because I was trying to get somebody lined up with a sponsor, and I trust him. And he was like, "Have you worked the steps?" And I was like, "Not like in order or anything." And like we had like the best conversation of like, he was like, "Well, you need to do that." And I'm like, "If you're willing, like, let me get you in contact with this guy." And so I got the big book and, started on that. And even just in that little process, because that's what he was telling me. He was like, dude, there's so much like to lead. You know what I mean? You got to work these things. And I'm at a place now, I wouldn't have received that well a year and a half ago, but like, God's humbled me so much. It's like, yeah, like I'm about to dig in, and it's the same thing. Like I started talking to, a guy that I really respect. He's like a Christian therapist, and like what I mean, like unlocking a lot of that stuff that I never went through the first time, and like seeing the value in it. But yeah, so like you said, rework the steps, and I think that that's something we can't. That's another thing I wish I would have done from the beginning, because even just in that conversation, me and him have had a couple, really good conversations. In the conversations, and he hasn't been sober nearly as long as me, but he has a wisdom about him that I don't have. It's like talking to him, it's like, dude, what I mean? Like you're pulling stuff and it's like blowing my mind. And I think that I just never thought, I knew people worked the steps, but it was just like never a thing for me. And it's like, I'm gonna, if I don't do this and understand it and understand myself better, I'm probably doing the people around me a disservice, And like I said, there's so many, like when you talk to somebody that's really worked the steps, there's a wisdom about them, and you're like, they have figured something out that I don't know that I figured out yet. You know what I mean?
Yeah, my track is not too dissimilar from yours. I started out going to Celebrate Recovery. And I landed out at South Creek Church of God recovery meetings on Mondays and Wednesday night, run by Chuck McCoskey. Shout out to them. He's one of my heroes, over 40 years sober. But I remember that wisdom thing saying, and like, all that I remember him telling me, Nate, none of these are original thoughts. You know what I mean? Like these, we stand on the shoulders of the people that came before us, right?
Yeah.
So when he's telling me that acceptance is the answer to all my problems today, I find it right there in the big book.
Yeah.
Finding out that drugs and alcohol are a very small part of my problem, if not my problem at all. They were a solution to my problems.
Yeah.
A very bad choice, bad solution, but they were that. These defects of character. Drugs and alcohol are only mentioned once, whether you're in NA or AA, or they're only mentioned once in the steps. Everything else is about this guy.
Yeah.
And accepting God as somebody who can remove the insanity.
So good. So good. So I'm through chapter 1, because I ended up getting in contact with the guy, and he was like, you got to get the big book. You got to get through the doctor's opinion. He explained what that meant, and then, and it's just, it's cool. And I think that's also like, never, don't put yourself in a box, you know what I mean? Or think like, I think one of my problems for a while was thought I had got to some point just because I had the years and I had the faith and people were asking me to talk like, and then it's like, you know what? There's so much, you're just gonna kind of flatline if you're not like ingesting and getting around people that challenge you and that are wiser, and that's
Yeah, that dangerous thought, I have arrived, right?
yeah,
Like, that's one of the most dangerous thoughts for us. And when I say South Creek 12-step meeting out there, what I liked about that was it's a faith-based 12-step meeting.
yeah,
So we identified who our higher power was.
yeah,
And that meant a lot for me early on. Now, I attend AA. I've spoken in AA, Celebrate Recovery, whatever A saves your A, right? I can
yeah.
go to any of them. But
Whatever Ace says, yeah, I like that.
But I just think, man, the 12 steps are a blueprint for, look, surrender, handling who I was and things I did, and how I'm living today.
Yeah,
10 through 12 is how I'm living today. I make direct amends whenever I wrong people. I try to carry the message to other addicts and alcoholics, and I think that's, if I follow that blueprint and keep God number one, because for me, it's non-negotiable, man. God and Jesus is recovery. It has been the center stone of my recovery, and it always will be.
yeah,
I'm not perfect. Sometimes I swear. Sometimes when I'm in the mud with somebody who's really hurting, some of the things that we talk about and say don't seem very, they're not going to be preached from the pulpit,
yeah,
but it's real.
yeah,
And I think God's at work in it.
yeah. Yeah, and that's what, like, I've always been challenged. It's like, yeah, I don't know, all the different paths to recovery, and I get that. And there's some places where we go, and it's like you have to watch talking about God, even though everything I'm going to operate in is biblical.
No.
But I wouldn't be here if I didn't lay at the feet of the cross.
Yeah.
There's no way around that in my story. Like, there's
Yeah.
no John getting to any place that looks even close to healthy and getting off of, the methadone and all of that stuff if I didn't encounter Jesus, if I didn't lay at the feet of the cross.
Yeah. No, I work in treatment, so it's clinical, medical.
Yeah.
But also have Jesus is King tattooed on my hands. So
Right.
it's hard for me to hide from why I got where I got. And
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to,
No.
and I believe in all of the science and the medical part of the disease of addiction.
Mm-hmm.
But the spiritual component, man, is, if left unexplored, unchecked, and you don't find that relationship with God, I mean, for me, you're just you're days away from your relapse.
Yeah. So much in that.
I serve every Sunday.
Yeah.
I'm pastor assistant. But okay, if you were talking about ministry stuff in the church, I mean, there's not a Sunday that it goes by that I'm not out in the lobby because we are a recovery centered church.
Yeah.
So I'm talking to addicts and alcoholics all day on Sunday.
Yeah.
Some struggling, some doing well, some hitting milestones, some hitting plateaus. I feel like the lobby is my ministry at times on Sunday.
That's a good ministry, though.
Yeah.
Hit them in the lobby.
Yeah.
And what time do they have? One service, or do
Three.
they have three? What time do their services start?
10 a.m., 11:30, and 1.
Oh, he's preaching
Oh,
on
yeah.
Sunday.
Oh,
Then,
yeah. He's dropping a word on them.
That's some time. What do you think in all this, when you were going to church there in the beginning, did you hear a sermon or something that like really hit you, or a message that really hit you, like when you were because it's an interesting thing, I think, because we're coming from like this world living out of backpacks and stuff, and you're ready, and everybody would look at you and be like, that poor person, you know what I'm saying? But you're almost like, I'm finding this new life. This is what it felt like to me, is like I'm finding this new life in this freedom, you know. But is there any like advice or a message that you got, that you heard, that you can remember, that like really stuck to you or kind of helped you in that time?
I can remember hearing a message on, you know, the three Hebrew boys, Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, and thrown into the fiery furnace, right? And throughout my entire active addiction, I always felt alone.
Yeah,
You know, like no one understands. I'm alone. I'm alone. And when was it King Nebuchadnezzar? I think looks into the fiery furnace. They're unscathed by the flames, and he sees a fourth man walking with them.
yeah,
And to know that even in my worst moments, even in the valley of the shadow of death, even in the lowest parts, God is with me. I'm never alone.
yeah,
And there's something to be gleaned in the strength that comes out of those moments. So that resonated with me big time. It's similar to I love. I don't know about you, but like I always felt completely unworthy of. You were touching on it earlier. I've gone too far. I've done too much.
yeah,
Things are too bad. I could never be around good people, right? And I remember hearing the clip from Pastor Stephen Furtick on the God of Jacob, and he's talking about Moses encounters the burning bush, and he says, "When I go back to my people, who will I tell them that sent this message?" And he said, "Tell them I am sent the message, right? I am who I am, and I am the God of Abraham, the God of I think Isaac, the
yeah.
God of Jacob." And when Furtick said, I expected him to say the God of Israel, because that was when
Yeah,
Jacob's name was changed in the wrestling match, and he changed his life. But he said, I'm the God of Jacob. I'm the God of your worst parts.
yeah,
I'm the God of the bad things you do. I'm still God to you, even if you feel that way or think that way about yourself. For me, it was huge.
yeah. That's a good message. And if you're listening and you're not familiar, Jacob was like, when you start to read, when you're reading through the story of Jacob, he's shady. Wouldn't you say, RJ, the dude's shady? And like, I remember the first time, like I was reading through it, not real sure what was going on, but I was like, I don't know about this dude. You know what I mean? He's painting goats, like what, all this weird stuff he's doing. It's like he's hustling everybody he comes across. And I think that's the thing about it, though, is this dude became, like, what God turned him into was phenomenal. But in that message, he said, "I'm the God of Jacob." That
Yeah.
old dude, that squirrely dude you can't trust, that was pretty much a thief, and
Oh, yeah.
people wanted to kill him.
When Furtick said, I'm the God of the parts of you don't want anyone to see. Man, like for an addict and alcoholic who's done the things that I've done, and I know a lot of us have lived like and experienced, that is a powerful thing.
Yeah,
Because, I'm not now, today, like you do, which I got to mention this part. This is a pretty full circle moment for me.
yeah,
Okay. Because I was like right around a year sober, 11, maybe 12 months sober. And I had a friend of mine show me this video. I think I spoke at Celebrate Recovery once. Said, hey, I think you can do this. And it's this video, and in it, the guy is talking to the whole police department in Marion,
yeah,
right, about his experiences and what he went through. And I thought, man, I want to do that, right? I'm only 11, and it was you.
yeah.
Much less gray, but
You're
but you were, and I remember saying to one of my mentors at the time, like, and my pastor, like, oh, this is what I want to do.
Yeah,
And as addicts and alcoholics, we can always try to put the cart before the horse, right?
yeah,
I remember pastor telling me, hey, man, you need to crawl before you walk before you run. Stay sober, keep growing in God, strengthen your prayer life, right? And God will make a way if this is, so I started to do that. today I've spoken, I speak to narcotics officers in multiple
Yeah.
different sheriff agencies through a great friend of mine, Sergeant Joe Farinella at the Tipton Police Department. He has a company called Sanctify Training Solutions, and they train narcotics officers. And I come in, kind of give them that, hey, on the other side of that warrant,
Yeah.
this is who's on the other side, right? And how they conduct themselves and how they act as officers matters, because my experience with officers in the end of my active addiction was actually not bad. Like, they were always trying to save the situation.
Yeah.
At the time, I thought they were the enemy. But in
Right.
hindsight, I looked back and thought they made an impact. Matter of fact, my arresting officer, he follows me on Facebook. We communicate all the time, or not all the time, but we've communicated
Yeah.
about where I'm at today and what I'm doing. All that is based on the fact that he showed me some dignity and respect and decency in the moment. Probably one of the worst moment of my life.
Yeah.
And he extended that to me then, and it made a huge impact. So that's kind of the message I deliver when I speak to those. But yeah, man, that video made a big impact on
That's
me,
so
man.
cool.
Yeah, man.
I was in front of it was the chaplaincy thing. I didn't even know what I was getting into.
Yeah. Well,
They're
there was
like,
police out
yeah,
there.
it was like the whole sheriff's department, and I was complaining about getting seatbelt violations.
Yeah, and I remember I spoke at the mayor. I was the guest speaker at the mayor's turnaround breakfast in Kokomo.
Yeah.
And I'm looking out there, and there's the police chief, and there's the fire chief, and I had that moment, like, man, this is what I wanted to do when I saw
Yeah.
that. I put in the work to get there.
Yeah, and God's put you in front of
Yeah.
a lot of people. Because I remember, like, we were friends on Facebook, and I remember, like, you'd share it, celebrate recovery. And it's like, this dude, and then like that moment hit. It was like, oh, you know what I mean? Like, you posted something about being sober, and I was like, this dude's like,
Well, yeah, we were talking earlier about that whole dating thing, right?
yeah,
Man, social media can be a double-edged sword. Mm-hmm. For me, in the beginning, I was set about trying to change the image of who I was in people's minds.
yeah,
I was trying to force that change on them.
yeah,
And the message just didn't deliver. And also, I had ulterior motives for the attention that I
Yeah.
wanted to get. And around COVID, when I took that year off dating, the message changed
yeah,
because I started to change. It was way less about me as a person. Are people paying attention to what we're talking about?
yeah,
That God is the answer, and you don't have to live that way. Because prior to that, I was trying my hardest to live for God, but I was very self-serving still.
yeah. Yeah, that's wild. And then it happened. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think it's such a cool thing because I think it's something that a lot of us have to go through. It's almost like for me, you get to before, like in the past, like the lines have gotten crossed up, and what am I doing here? You know what I'm saying? Even though it
absolutely.
looks like things are going amazing and everything, and God's humbled me like pretty publicly. You know what I'm saying? There's probably still people that hate me. You know what I mean? And but like that's what it took for me. And then you're sitting there like, man, you know what I mean? The thing is like what's scary is to look back at times where it was like I was sharing, which I don't think is possible, but I was sharing the glory with God. You know what I mean? I was letting him in on my glory. I was letting the God
That's good.
he saved my life and I'm letting him in. You know, I'm giving him a little piece of the pie.
Yeah.
And then I would wake up. A lot of times something would happen and like, you know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? Some of the stuff you're doing, comes out. But other times, like I've woke up before and been like, man, in a panic, like I'm not in alignment with God.
Yeah.
Like, who is this dude? John, without God, you're in line at a methadone clinic, holding your kids in the middle of winter, with nothing. You literally have nothing without God. And here you are trying to take what? You know what I mean? Take credit for what?
And we're hard-headed, man. Like, learn the hard way, right?
Yeah.
And even post that time period, I've still been had moments of being humbled. Like I hired in at First City Recovery Center as a lead behavioral health tech. Fast-tracked, worked all the way up to director of operations, and that was not my bag.
Yeah.
I failed miserably at it because once I got there, guess what? You need somebody to fill in on a group. I got too much going on. I'm too busy for that. All of a sudden, it became look where I got to.
Yeah.
Look where Nate's at. And less about look where God got me to. Look where God has elevated. And I started descending down that mountain. I'm blessed to have a great company and great employers who we figured it out.
Yeah.
And I found out where my talents are best at. But without God, I'm not even in that position.
Right.
I lose sight of that,
Yeah.
and like you said, I'm back in jail, or
I don't have a voice.
yeah,
I mean, any attention I've ever gotten is because Jesus Christ saved my life.
right, yeah,
And I used to be, I used to be a mess, still am sometimes, but the only thing I can take credit for is all the bad stuff.
mm-hmm.
All the bad decisions, that was me without God. That was me without wise counsel. Yeah. And he'll humble you the way that it's necessary. I would prefer in private, but it's, what I mean? It does.
I
I guess
I
it does.
learned that way though.
No, it doesn't work.
Well, too, like my kids, man, what giving my life to Christ has allowed is, I'm not oblivious to the fact there's going to be moments where people challenge my kids, saying, who your dad was. Mm-hmm. I think what giving my life to Christ has allowed for them, and healing with them and making amends, is for them to say, yeah, but here's who he is.
Yeah.
That's a big thing for me.
Yeah.
God provided that opportunity. That doesn't mean that people aren't going to try to hold me to that or keep me there. But I think God has provided a huge opportunity for my kids, and they will say, oh, this is who this man is today.
And the cool thing about the kids watching is no matter what path they take, you get what I'm saying? Like, they've seen a way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? No matter what happens in their life, they're like, okay, my dad, went through everything that he went through, and the only thing that worked,
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean? The only thing that worked was, faith, Jesus Christ, and that dude praising God. It's the only thing that worked. And, I think it's comforting to know, like, they know.
Mm-hmm.
Now, whatever our kids choose, because, I've got my daughters, whatever they choose to do, they know that when they're in the pit,
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean, there is a God that they've seen pull their parents out or pull their fathers out of that mess.
Yeah.
And literally change them and give and make them a voice, because like we can't take credit for that, but you're only a light and a voice because God's like, I'm going to choose that one for whatever reason. Maybe it's because we're a touch ignorant by nature, you know what I mean? And just like, well, that one will do anything. They don't care, So I'm going to take that one right there and put them over here and have them start helping. But that's really like a cool thought for me. It's like, if I die tomorrow, first off, I'm blessed to have lived with the 12 and a half years of house money that I've been playing with and, to watch restoration. But also I know that my daughters, at least, if I leave them with nothing else, I know that they know that there's a God out there and that he's real. And whatever painful circumstances, self-inflicted or by other people, like, he's there.
Yeah. Yeah, and that when I first got sober, I used to like to say, yeah, I was in that jail cell and I surrendered to God and he showed up. Well, I had that wrong, because as I got sober and life went on, sobriety and recovery went on, I started to look back in my life and see all these moments where he was there as well. I just didn't take the hand.
Yeah.
I just chose to go the other direction. So I think he's always there,
Yeah.
and that's something that I think our journeys and how we do our thing, our kids see that, like, that God is there, and they may stray,
Yeah.
but they hit that hard spot, they're going to know exactly who to look to.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's huge. It's huge.
And I think that's one of the things, like, with people listening, when you do, like, it is important for you to, I feel like, have, like, the honest conversations with your kids about where you've been through and what God's brought you through. Like, it's not, we're used to it now, but it's not like the funnest thing to sit down and be like, "Hey, kids, I made a mistake here or there," but they need to hear that stuff because we don't want them chasing perfection either.
Yeah.
Like you can,
And, in the same respect, though, what happened with me when I watched that video, right? And what I see this generation or these kids is, I had this in high school and beyond, like, oh, well, being a Christian or getting saved is boring and
yeah,
is not cool and it's not this and that. And then I see where you're at, right? And I'm just a year sober because you're farther along at the time, right? And I'm like, this is appealing. We become a attraction, not promotion, right?
yeah,
Sometimes, and how you're living, the message you were talking about, like it was something I actually wanted to aspire to be,
yeah,
and I think kids are seeing that today.
hmm,
Like the greatest thing I think happening right now is making living for God and being sober a cool thing.
yeah,
That people are out there doing that.
yeah,
You talked earlier about your buddies in Fort Wayne, like Nate Mollering, Tommy
yeah,
Streeter, Sam Helser, them guys. Like, look, them are cool dudes.
yeah,
Like they're making recovery cool.
hmm,
The ownership, Dan Metz, Rudy Rice at First City. It's to me, it's changed a lot. I don't know. Maybe if it was just I had the scales
yeah,
on my eyes,
yeah.
but I see people are not afraid of the message anymore.
And I think we're real.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
think that, because I know that, like, when me and Cody go into the schools, we're not like, it's not a recipe.
Right.
You know what I mean? I don't even know if we talk about what we're going to talk. Like, we may say, hey, we need to adjust this or that. But it's like what this next generation also needs is like transparency
Hmm.
instead of like where some of us were raised, like, your parents don't talk about, if they snorted cocaine or not. Well, we do.
Mm.
You know what I'm saying? Like, and I think that level of like just being open and transparent, and the way we operate with our kids, like we have a genuine, and I think also like a grateful relationship, because this
Yeah.
wasn't promised to us. We know what it feels like to not
Yeah.
have them and not know if we're ever going to have them or a relationship with them. And when you know that feeling, like when they're in front of you, even though sometimes you want to kill them, you know what I mean? It's like you understand, like that the relationship and the bond you have is like this sweet, genuine thing. Like,
Yeah.
tougher dudes even are like, we buckle, and like we're
Hmm.
just these like soft dads. You know what I mean? And
And man, I grew up a Catholic, going to Catholic, right? And I always just thought, man, I'm doing everything wrong. Like that's all I ever thought.
yeah,
And God really hates me,
yeah,
right? And had a skewed view on who God really was, right? But now we have pastors today and people like us that talk about it. I remember my pastor standing up there and saying, the moment that I stop smelling alcohol in the line going out or stop smelling weed is the moment that I've stopped doing the work that God has put me here to do.
that's good.
God, he tell me all the time, God is not interested in behavior modification. He's interested in heart transformation.
Yeah,
Transform your heart, your behavior changes.
yeah,
Come as you are, and watch God do the work. And for a pastor to say that, I would never have heard that when I was a kid.
right.
You know what I mean? Like for him to even say smelling alcohol or weed, like people, it just wouldn't even have been discussed up there.
Yeah,
And he gets real with that stuff, because when I look at it, like that's what Jesus did.
yeah,
The woman at the well or wherever he was going, like he was in the trenches.
yeah,
He was in the. I tell my kids all the time, like, you don't get it twisted on who Jesus was. A revolutionary.
yeah.
He brought about revolutionary change.
He made religious people uncomfortable,
We-
very
Very,
uncomfortable. A couple times they tried to kill him. Like the parts in the Bible where it's like Jesus had to take off because they decided, he knew they were about to kill him. It's like this dude's making statements,
absolutely.
verbal statements, not to mention all the miracles. But he's like, well, we better go now, guys. Could you imagine being in his crew and be like, dude, we got to leave town again? Yeah, they're going to kill us.
And I need spiritual mentorship and guidance, and I need my Sunday at church, and I need my. But if Jesus was physically walking around right now, where do I think he would be? At an AA meeting, at an NA meeting, at a Celebrate Recovery meeting, in the mud,
Outside the bar.
outside the bar. Like they thought they labeled him in his day, Jesus, friend of sinners, like it was a bad label. I love that label,
Yeah.
because he didn't come to save the spiritually elite.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, I think what I love, like you can read through the Gospels, and then you can read through them again, and then you can read through them again, and like you catch these revelations of Jesus over and over again. He was not worried about Nathan's sin leaking onto him.
Right.
You know what I mean? He
Right.
wasn't like, oh, I can't touch that. And at some point, I think sometimes that's how we get. It's like, well, I can't. And you got to be safe. You get what I'm saying? Don't
For
be
sure.
2 weeks clean off of crack, and then be trying to be in the trap house ministering to people. Like there's steps to this, and I say that only kind of joking because that's almost like that's what you want to do. But it's
For
like
sure.
get your foundation. But he was never worried. Like he wasn't worried about people's sin and disease and their sickness leaking on him.
Yeah.
It never crossed his mind like, oh, if I go around this person and pray for them and I'm a light to them, their ugly might leak onto me, because his ministry was ugly, messy ministry.
Yeah, I mean, look at the disciples. Like, they're some rough dudes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? These dudes had been living different lives. They'd been, I love when he told them, cast your nets and I'll make you fishers of men. Like he took us,
Yeah.
the people, and he turned them into the message.
Yeah.
Just by believing in him and following him. To me, that's like, look, I need a Paul to read about. I need a Peter who had an anger problems, and
He was cutting off ears with swords.
Boy,
The
just
dude-
chop it right there in the garden. Was it Garden of Gethsemane?
That was bold. Even though the next morning he kind of sold out, that night, or that morning, him cutting that a Roman soldier's ear off in front of the whole crew, like in front of other Roman soldiers.
Well, you talked about it too, though. You said even as we're sober, like I make these big public mistakes, or I get corrected by God publicly, right? So he sells out the next morning. But what happens in that public sellout there? What does he do with it? He ends up dedicating the rest of his life until he is crucified, and refuses to be crucified like his Savior, and they crucify him upside down.
Yeah.
To me, that's what we do in this. Like, I'm always redeemable because I'm fallible. I'm human.
Yeah.
I make mistakes, right? My job is to live for God and not pick up and make direct amends for the things I do today.
Yeah.
Now, I can't think of a more direct amends than what Peter made after that morning.
Which is, it's funny because they were eating after Jesus was resurrected, like they're eating on the beach, and he's like, "You're going to have the same fate as me." And Peter's like, "Hold on a second." Points at John. He's like, "Well, what about him?" He's like, "Don't worry about him." You know what I mean? But Peter did it. I mean, he looked at him right there in that moment, and I think I think what's cool to me is like he denied Jesus 3 times, and Jesus said, "Do you love me?" 3 times. And they're sitting there, eating. This is after the resurrection. But Peter knew, because Jesus looked at him and he was like, "You're, basically saying," this is the John version, it should be doctrinally sound, but, it's like, you're going to have the same fate as me. And Peter, being Peter, was like, "Hold up a second, bro. What about him?" And he was like, "Don't worry about him, but you're going to have the same," So Peter knew in that moment, if I continue claiming Jesus, and he saw that, he heard, because he took off, but he saw that beginning part. So to know, Peter knew, like, this is going, I'm going to have a rough life. And Paul was so, Holy Spirit, we talk about Holy Spirit being the comforter, and he'd be walking into a town, Holy Spirit like, "Yeah, you're probably going to get beat here, jail, and you might die. Okay, let's go." You know what I mean? That was the comfort he got, but he found, like, he was on another level of, like, I'm ready to die for this. Take me,
I had somebody tell me one time the definition of addiction is using despite all negative consequences. when I look at Peter's move there, that's us on a faith turn, right?
Yeah.
Now we've turned that to faith. I'm going to have faith despite all negative consequences.
Yeah.
Despite what my life sometimes may not feel or look better.
Yeah.
But I know what my purpose is, and I know, where this is heading. Because my pastor would tell me all the times, I would get sober, and I'm saved, and then all this stuff's happening. And he's like, you thought that this stuff wasn't going to happen?
Yeah.
Like, the attacks start coming, right? And our faith gets us through it. So it's kind of a parallel I see from the life I lived in active addiction to my faith walk. Is sometimes like I've got to keep on my walk and keep doing my thing, even if bad things happen.
Yeah. Well, I don't think, and I think also like a lot of us would like, if you have been in, active addiction and you get out of it and you turn that to something, if you turn that energy to something, you're a force.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And you're a force because there's nothing that was stopping me. And we talk about it all the time from getting high.
Oh, yeah.
When it was time to get, like, if I started to feel sick, like nothing's stopping me from getting what I need. You know what I mean? I'm not going to feel that way. And now it's like you get saved and it's like you channel that same energy, but towards running after God or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And you're we're a little crazy. You know what I'm saying? Like,
No, I sometimes I kick myself for telling certain stories from the back in the day. And I told my pastor the story about I was in active addiction. I was dope sick. I ended up walking from Walnut Street to North Street in 13 below temperature just to get and walking all the way back and almost losing a toe. And then in my struggle moments, it's like, hey, you're going to do that, but you're not going to push through. Oh,
right.
yeah, like if I'm willing to do that, what lengths? I'm willing to go to any lengths to stay sober and to live for God.
And you can't tell your pastor that story and then say, "Hey, I can't come in today because I missed church today because I got a cold."
Right. Yeah. There's no excuses.
Yeah, you got to show up. You get a text message like, "Bro, you got lost a toe for the dope. What you gonna do for Jesus?" So this was a good conversation. We're probably going to have you back, man. I appreciate you coming in. Fuel Church is the church, and that's in Kokomo that we've talked about quite a bit. And what about, do you want to do a plug for where you work and stuff where people can reach out?
Yeah, I work at First City Recovery Center. So you can, the phone number you can find online and from the website. But yeah, we do, we're a fully medically licensed Joint Commission accredited treatment center. We have, on the substance use side, we have acute detox, residential programming, PHP, partial hospitalization, and IOP. And then we also have our medically licensed for mental health only. So we have inpatient mental health, residential mental health, PHP, and IOP.
So that pretty much covers about everything.
Everything, yeah.
And I think that's one of the things, I want your opinion before we check out, but a lot of times people are looking for treatment. And I will say, we've been in this field quite a while now. And when you are reaching out and looking for treatment for a loved one and stuff like that, I strongly encourage you to check the backgrounds of the places that you're sending people and stuff like that, because there are a lot of good companies and good treatment facilities and good providers, but there are some that aren't. We've heard some horror stories too. So if you're reaching out for a loved one or yourself, make sure that you're looking at, looking into it a little bit more. Don't just take the first place that will take them. Whether it's reaching out to local, when we have people, we know the people that we kind of trust to send people. But do you want to dig in on that a little bit before we go? Because I know we kind of talked about that too.
I think a good barometer for that is if someone reaches out to me and we say we don't take their insurance, the call doesn't stop there.
Yeah.
I facilitate a referral to somewhere where they whether they have HIP or Medicaid, which something about First City, we just purchased a building half a block away that is going to be 46 more beds. And we will be eventually going in network with Medicaid HIP also to service, which is a highly underserved population, right?
Yeah.
Because I know personally for me, when I came out of jail and I couldn't, I didn't have insurance. I didn't even know where my birth certificate was.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think I even had a driver's license, hard copy. So, and the beautiful thing about First City working its way towards the Medicaid HIP thing is, I think we've scholarshiped something up over 20% of our client base to date. Because one thing about our ownership is they're all in recovery, and they know the value, so we have a non-for-profit called End Our List that provides funding for people who can't.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So, but make sure that you're sending your people to a place that you've, heard good things about, because that's another thing we had kind of discussed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there are places out there that you don't want to send.
Well, yeah, I think before regulatory came in, the way it was down in Florida for a while, there was some shady business going on, and there was most definitely the exploitation of the addict and alcoholic for insurance purposes or whatnot. I think they've come in and cleaned up that mess.
Yeah.
And that was First City took its first client February 2021. That had already all happened.
Yeah.
So, and our owner, Dan Metz, he's from Kokomo. He went down to Florida to get sober and wanted to bring a treatment center that the kind in which he didn't see down there.
Right. Something different.
Yeah. To his hometown. And they succeeded in doing that. And, we're plugged into the local community in Kokomo. Obviously we're involved in everything, overdose awareness events, community outreach. We partner with Carver Center on some things. We partner with Kokomo Urban Outreach. And, we're always looking to give back in the community. And then we make relationships with all our local businesses to get people into treatment.
If somebody wanted to sponsor somebody, how do they do that? Could they do that?
As
you said, a scholarship. If somebody, is there ways for people to do that?
So you could just call the admission line, and then somebody could ask about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But if we couldn't at the moment, depending on what's in we will make sure they get somewhere.
Okay.
And somewhere that we trust.
Yeah.
We also have Magnolia City Detox in Houston, Texas, which is a sister facility.
Houston.
Mm-hmm. Hot.
Down in the H.
Hot.
If you want to get your recovery and sweat to death, they can send you down
The facility is very well air conditioned.
I hope so.
No, it's a great. It's just as detox residential, substance use only, and sometimes First City's at capacity as far as our detox. We'll send somebody there, then they'll come and do aftercare with us.
That's cool.
At First City.
So that's awesome. I hope you all got that. Go check him out. Check the website out. Nathan's on Facebook, and he's always sharing good stuff, too, about what he's got going on, but just good, encouraging stuff a lot of times, too. So, Nathan, it has been an honor to have you. I'm glad we got you in here. And as always, we want to thank Delivered Media and RJ. He's the man behind the curtain over here that makes everything happen with our editing. You can get a hold of them if you need anything. They also, we say this every week, but they help churches set up things like video and stuff like that. So hit up Delivered Media. This has been Escaping the Chains podcast, and we are so glad you tuned in. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Check us out on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Thank you all for listening.